Wilaya of Ali in Adhan was considered to be bid'ah, and it's only in the Safavid period that this Ghali edition was resurrected and revived, and it was mainstreamed. Unfortunately, today it's the Safavids who are being followed. Their version of Shiaism is being followed, not the original classical version of Shiaism. He said, "Kullu bid'atin dalala," every innovation is deviation. And remember, Shia in their time were not a sect. These are words Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam uttered lamma hadaratul wafat, when death approached him. Notice how he only mentions shahadatayn. There is no third shahada that he mentions. Yani even as kalima of Islam and Iman, an identity that Imam Ali alayhi salam is promoting is that of being a Muslim. He doesn't say la tamutunna illa wa antum shi'a. Wa la tafarraqu. We are not supposed to create division and disunity in the ummah and create sects in the ummah. Our people, unfortunately, are very backward when it comes to knowledge and understanding of the Quran, and express appreciation for the efforts of both the World Federation, which has declared this year to be the year of the Quran. The Africa Federation, for example, they organize Quran recitation, Quran memorization, Quran ma'rifah. Is it enough for a person to merely embellish himself as a Shia, yani to claim that he's a Shia, simply by professing love for us, the Ahlul Bayt? The mention of Allah is Madhloom on the Shia Mimbar. Yani Allah doesn't get enough coverage by their abundant and excessive zikr of Ali, and all the time Fadail Ali and Khaybar and Khandaq and this and that. Saying the third Shahada in Adhan, combining of the 5 daily prayers, all of these things, these are bid'ahs. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. My respected elders, my dearest youngsters, brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is further to the lecture I had previously delivered about a worrying and disturbing phenomenon that we are witnessing on our community pulpits, in our community centers. This phenomenon whereby sectarianism is being promoted at the expense of abandoning the authentic and reliable transmissions and teachings of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wasalam, just so that we can maintain a separate and distinct identity from the rest of the Ummah. Interestingly, even on those things in which the rest of the Ummah is on the same page and on the same wavelength as the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salatu wasalam. So issues like, for example, not reciting third Shahada in the Adhan, the rest of the Ummah and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt are on the same page. Performing iftar and observing Maghribs, offering Salatul Maghrib immediately following sunset, as soon as the disk of the sun has disappeared, mainstream Ummah and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt are on the same page. Yet, to defy out of defiance and opposition to the mainstream Ummah, and in an effort, in a misguided and misplaced effort to create a separate, distinct identity for the Shia, some of these shuyukh want to promote and defend and uphold these innovations without any regard for the fact that they were actually introduced by the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt, because separating the Shia from the rest of the Ummah was the grand vision of the Ghulat. It was their diabolical and nefarious grand plan. It was not part of the mission of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimu salam. Their mission was to promote the Sunnah, the authentic Sunnah. Regardless of whether the mainstream Ummah agrees with that Sunnah, doesn't agree, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt were committed to promoting the correct Sunnah. And so when they asked us to observe Maghrib as soon as the disk of the sun has disappeared, it was not simply to establish conformity with the rest of the Ummah who got the same teaching from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but rather, so the goal was not conformity with the Ummah so much as it was observing the actual Sunnah. But unfortunately, this Sunnah got replaced by fabrications of the Ghulat. And that is how, unfortunately, things that were previously viewed in the classical period as innovations, as deviations of the Ghulat, today they have come to define and they have come to serve as identifying marks of Shiaism. And that's why we had shared with you and we had referred you to a very scholarly research paper authored by Professor Liaqat Taqim, where he talks about how it's entitled From Bid'ah to Sunnah, the Wilaya of Ali in Shi'i Adhan, and he's basically explained how from the time of the Imams all the way to the classical period, up to the medieval period, Wilayah of Ali in Adhan was considered to be bid'ah, and it's only in the Safavid period that this Ghali edition was resurrected and revived, and it was mainstreamed. It was turned into an acceptable sectarian practice for obvious political, geopolitical, military reasons. They feared absorption by the Ottoman Empire. So in any case, unfortunately, today it's the Safavids who are being followed. Their version of Shiaism is being followed, not the original classical version of Shiaism. And what was considered to be bid'ah in classical Shiaism has now come to define what is considered to be sunnah and mustahab in modern day contemporary Shiaism. So we said that this is a huge problem. In terms of solution, obviously the solution is to return to the authentic sunnah. But in this lecture, what I want to do is share with you some food for thought with regard to what, when it comes to your identity as followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt. We are not saying that you shouldn't distinguish yourself with anything. No. In fact, if you go into the teachings of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, والسلام, they have actually given you things which, if you follow, you will definitely become distinguished in the Ummah. Our whole point is that we are not against distinction, and we're not against having our own distinctions and being distinguished in the Ummah. That's not what we are against. What we are against is the foolishness or the foolish act of distinguishing ourselves from the Ummah in those areas where the Ummah and the Imams are on the same page. Where the Ummah is following the correct Sunnah of the Prophet and the Imams, even in that area you want to come and tell me and say, well, because the Ummah is following our Imams in this, we will not follow our Imams in this area. This is foolishness. This is a nonsensical way of thinking. It's completely illogical. Why should we abandon what is authentically transmitted from our A'immah alayhimus salam just because the rest of the Ummah is following? If the rest of the Ummah is following our Imams more than us, more power to them. And we should try to be more like them rather than the other way around. And this is something Allah has warned us against in the Quran when He tells us that Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina lillahi shuhada'a bil qisti wa la yajrimannakum shana'anu qawmin ala alla ta'dilu i'dilu huwa aqrabu littaqwa. Allah warns us that let not opposition or hostility or enmity with a certain people lead you to abandon the course of taqwa and righteousness and justice. i'dilu huwa aqrabu littaqwa. Act with justice and fairness, that is closer to taqwa. This ayah was revealed in the context of the mushrikeen. Allah was teaching the believers that you shouldn't allow your enmity and hostility to the kuffar and mushrikeen of Mecca to come in the way of your acting upon justice. Today, unfortunately, we are having to tell this to people to observe with Muslims that you have developed such opposition to the rest of the mainstream Muslim Ummah that even where they're following the Imams and they're following the correct Sunnah, to defy them and to be distinct and separate from them, you want to do something else. So khair, without dwelling too much on this, I want to come to the main point of this lecture, which is that if you truly want to distinguish yourself, you want to become distinguished in the Ummah, you want to have something that really defines you and identifies you as a true follower and Shia of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. It's not like the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have left you empty-handed. They have actually given you pointers and tips and advice, and they've actually highlighted qualities and characteristics and attributes and traits that are supposed to distinguish you from the rest of the Ummah if you follow them. And in fact, the classical scholars like Shaykh al-Saduq himself, they wrote entire books, entitled, for example, Sifatu Shia, the qualities of the Shia. You refer to books like this, and you will find what kind of narrations. Obviously, not all the narrations in them are authentic, but by cross-verifying against the worldview of the Quran, you can easily determine which of these narrations are actually from the Imams and which ones are not. in the authentic narrations, you will see them highlighting and promoting certain qualities and attributes that are very highly praised in the Quran. And the Imams are telling their Shia and their followers that adopt this quality, adopt this characteristic, and I want you to be distinguished in the Ummah with this quality and this characteristic and this attribute. So in this lecture, I want to share with you some of these qualities and attributes, so that agar aapko jo hai ummat mein bahut alag hone ka shauq hai, you want to be really different, you want to stand out, you want to shine, well, these are the qualities that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam taught you, on the basis of which you can establish a distinct identity for yourself, different from everyone else, and still be on the path to salvation. Because look, if you distinguish yourself from the Ummah and separate yourself from the Ummah by defying the Ummah and going against the practice of the Ummah on things on which they're actually following the Ahlul Bayt, you want to distinguish yourself from the Ummah by following bid'ah, then this is a recipe for disaster. Because bid'ah, and we, for example, in the case of the third shahada, I already established, I gave you the stance of the classical Shi'i scholar, Shaykh al-Saduq, all the way from the classical period, and then contemporary academic scholarship, their entire papers proving how third shahada is a bid'ah that replaced the sunnah of not saying third shahada in the adhan. So don't take the matter of bid'ah lightly. Bid'ah, okay, sio mchezo, sio kitu ndogo. Bid'ah in the teaching of Ahlul Bayt, an innovation that is not approved by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, is a very dangerous thing. It can ruin your salvation. This is Sahih al-Kafi, collection of authentic narrations from al-Kafi, which have been authenticated and compiled by Al-Allama al-Sheikh Muhammad Baqir al-Bahbudi. Okay, this is the first vintage edition, Ad-Dar al-Islamiyya. If you come to page 9 of this book, you will see that he mentions this very important warning from Al-Imam Abu Abdullah al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, with his sanad, with his impeccable chain that goes up to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he transmits from the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, the hadith which says, Kullu bid'atin dalala. The Prophet of Allah warned the Ummah. He said, Kullu bid'atin dalala. Every innovation is deviation. Wa kullu dalalatin finnar. And every deviation shall be in the fire of hell. If you practice that deviation, you will end up where? You will end up in the fire of hell. So it is really the height of foolishness to embrace an innovation invented by the ghulat, a bid'ah that was called out and condemned by the classical Shia scholars, that was invented by the ghulat. You embrace that as your identifier and as your distinguishing feature. This is the height of foolishness. Instead of doing that, why don't you embrace qualities and attributes and characteristics that were actually identified by the Imams as being things that should distinguish you? There were certain things that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam actually did want the Shia to be known for in the Ummah. And remember, Shia in their time were not a sect. They were not, they didn't have their own separate aqidah, and even in fiqh, their differences with the rest of the Ummah were very minimal. Almost as much as there are differences between the four schools, the same amount of differences existed between the Ja'fari school and the rest of the schools. These differences were later on magnified and multiplied by the Ghulat and the Mufawwida, and also by sectarian elements. So in the time of the Imams, the Shia were a political party. They were Muslims with the same aqidah and more or less the same uniform fiqh as the rest of the Muslims. Where they differed with the rest of the Ummah was in a worldly matter, in the matter of politics, which is, they said that we want to see the family of the Prophet in power. We feel the best candidates to lead this Ummah come from this family. And so we want to see them in power and we support them. Whereas the rest of the Muslims, politically, they supported other personalities. That was all there is to it. And they were not doing takfir of each other, in the sense that the Shia were not telling those other Muslims that you will go to hell. And in fact, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt were particular in emphasizing it, because there were some ghulat who had started claiming that anyone who is not part of the political party of Ahlul Bayt, if you're not a Shia, you will go to hell. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam refuted them. We've already shared the narration from Al-Kafi, no need to share it again. But the point is that in the time of the Imams, the Shia were a political party who supported the Imams of Ahlul Bayt and wanted to see them lead the Ummah. That was what Shiaism was about. But they also had certain distinguishing features. They were not lousy Muslims. Even as Muslims, they had certain qualities that the Imams of Ahlul Bayt wanted them to have and to serve as a distinguishing factor between them and everyone else in the Ummah. What are those qualities? This is what I want to highlight for you. The first narration that I want to highlight for you is from the book Tuhful Uqul an Rasul. Okay, this is a collection of narrations from the Imams of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. And this wasiyah of Imam Ali alayhi salam, it's a very famous wasiyah. And I want to start with Imam Ali alayhi salam because he's the Imamul A'immah, he's the Imam of all the Imams. And he's the central figure around which Shiaism developed. So let's see what the Imam, the ultimate Imam of the Shia, what did he say? Was there any quality that he wanted to see the Shias having a particular level of distinction in and excellence in? Indeed, there is. In Tuhful Uqul, you will see the author has provided the wasiyah of Imam Ali alayhi salam on his deathbed to his son Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam and to all those who were gathered around him. It's called Wasiyatuhu ila al-Hasan lamma hadarathu al-wafat. This is the Muassasatul A'lammi edition, page 138. I can also share the scan so that those who want to follow us on the screen may do so. Okay, this is Tuhful Uqul an Rasul by Shaykh al-Thiqa al-Jalil al-Aqdam Abu Muhammad al-Hasan bin Ali bin al-Husayn bin Shu'bah al-Harrani. Okay, min A'lam al-Qarn al-Rabi'. This is the Al-A'lami edition. You come to page 138. This is the document I'm talking about. The wasiyah of Imam Ali alayhi salam to his son Al-Hasan alayhi salam. Since we are approaching the nights in which the followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt will be remembering the martyrdom of Imam Ali alayhi salam, it is also particularly important that we focus on these words. These are words Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam uttered lamma hadaratul wafat, when death approached him. Yani, at the time of his martyrdom, when he's about to leave this world, these are words of wasiyah that he issues. Awsa al-mu'minina, he does wasiyah to the mu'mineen bishahadati an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, with the first shahada of Islam, to testify that there is no God but Allah, and he's the one and only with no partners, wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, and that Muhammad is the slave and the messenger. Arsalahu bil huda wa dinil haqqi liyudhhirahu ala ad-din kullihi walau kariha al-mushrikun wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa sallam. Notice how he only mentions shahadatayn. There is no third shahada that he mentions. Yani even as kalima of Islam and Iman, in the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam, there was no concept that after you say La ilaha illallah and Muhammadan Rasulullah, then you also have to testify that Ali is Waliullah, even though Ali is Waliullah. But this is not part of the Shahada of Islam and Iman. That's why you can see Imam Ali alayhi salam himself, he only mentions two Shahadas, La ilaha illallah and Muhammadan Abduhu wa Rasuluh. That's it. There is no mention of this wilayah that was later developed into Aqidah by the ghulat and by sectarian elements. The Imam of the Shia knows only two shahadatain, which he's saying at the time of his death, shahadat an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. So then, why do we love and honor Imam Ali so much? Because he's giving us the teachings of Allah and the Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We access the deen through him. He's a very key transmitter of the deen. That's why we accept him as our Imam. But accepting him as the Imam and considering him his wilayah and his imamah is not part of the deen, right? And that's why he doesn't mention it in his own wasiyah. Rather, he goes on to say, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. This is Rabbaniya, okay? God-centric view. He's saying my prayer, my sacrifice, my life, my death is all for Allah, who is the Lord of all the universes, the sustainer of all the universes. La sharika lahu. He has no partners. Wa bidhalika umirtu. This is what I've been commanded. Wa ana awwalul muslimin. And I'm of the first to submit to Allah. Thumma inni usika ya Hasan. Then, oh Hasan, I give you wasiyah. My last and final advice and will and testament to you is, to you, O Hasan, wa jami' wuldi, and to all my sons and offspring, wa ahl bayti, to my family, wa man balaghahu kitabi min al-mu'minin, and to all of the believers to whom my book, my document, my last and final will reaches, all of them I'm advising them bi taqwallahi rabbikum. My advice to them is distinguish yourself with taqwallah, your sustainer, fear of Allah, your sustainer, وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ, and do not die except as Muslimun. So you can see the badge of honor and identity that Imam Ali alayhi salam is promoting is that of being a Muslim. He doesn't say لَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ شِيعَةً. Don't die except that you are members of the political party that supports me. No. The goal of our Imams was to promote Islam and Iman, not their political party. Okay. And then he says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, hold fast to the rope of Allah. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, and don't get divided into splinter groups and sects. Imagine Amirul Mu'mineen, our Imam, our beloved Imam, on his deathbed. This is his advice, that we are supposed to hold fast to the rope of Allah. وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, we are not supposed to create division and disunity in the Ummah and create sects in the Ummah. فإني سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم يقول صلاح ذات البين أفضل من عامة الصلاة والصوم. He then narrates this hadith where the Holy Prophet صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم said that bringing about reconciliation in the Ummah is superior to general prayer and fasting. وإن المبيرة, and the real destroyer, وهي الحالقة, the thing that really shaves, you know, the way you shave your head, you completely eliminate all the hair. In the same way, what will completely eliminate and destroy the deen is fasadu dhatil bayn, is to create fasad and disunity and division. Wala quwwata illa billah, and there is no power except from Allah. Anyways, this wasiyah inshallah will present to you in more detail when we have the tawfiq to do that. Right now we want to focus on the quality that Amirul Mu'mineen wanted his followers to be distinguished by. What is that? As you can see, I've highlighted it for you. He says, Allah Allah fil Qur'ani فَلَا يَسْبِقَنَّكُمْ إِلَى الْعَمَلِ بِهِ غَيْرُكُمْ. He says, I ask you to remember Allah and fear Allah in the matter of the Qur'an. Let no one supersede you. Let no one, لَا يَسْبِقَنَّكُمْ. Okay? Let no one overtake you. In what? إِلَى الْعَمَلِ بِهِ غَيْرُكُمْ. Let the ghair, let the others who are not of you, don't allow them to overtake you and leave you behind in acting out the Quran, in acting upon the Quran. So Imam Ali alayhi salam, what did he want? He wanted the Shia, his followers, his Ahlul Bayt, his family. This wasiyah is for all of them. He says, I want you to be the first and foremost, number one, in acting upon the Quran. What is our situation today? Unfortunately, forget about amal bil Quran. In ilm bil Quran, we are so, because you see, amal cannot happen without ilm. To act on the Quran, you first have to have ilm of the Quran. You have to have knowledge of the Quran. Our people, unfortunately, are very backward when it comes to knowledge and understanding of the Quran, tadabbur in the Quran, relationship with the Quran. And what can we say about the lay people when the top maraji' in Najaf and Qum are lamenting at how the Quran has been abandoned? It has been systematically sidelined in the Hawza curriculum itself. So unfortunately, distance from the Quran, abandonment of the Quran is something that the likes of Ayatullah, Al-Uzma, Sayyid Ali, Al-Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, has lamented that this is something that's the Quran is absent and missing from the Hawza curriculum. Ayatullah Sheikh Haidar has written a whole document about problems of Hawza education. One of the key problems he highlights is ghiyab al-Quran, its complete absence. And, you know, it's like the Quran is in ghiyab, ghaiba. It's in occultation as far as the curriculum of the Hawzat is concerned. But more so, when the scholarship is like that, then obviously in the general public also you have this syndrome of distance from the Quran, not actively reading, studying the Quran, and doing tadabbur. And when people try to do, the scholarship comes and scares them and says, oh, you will fall into tafsir bil ra'i, and you're not supposed to just leave the Quran for the ulama. This is not, you are, until you have spent 70 years in the hawza, you shouldn't be really, you can read the Quran tilawatan to get thawab for barakah. You can even read superficially translation, but don't derive anything, don't derive any lessons. That is the job of the scholars, unfortunately. And what is Imam Ali alayhi salam saying? Is this wasiyah only for the scholars? He says, وَمَنْ بَلَغَهُ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. This advice and wasiyah is not just for the maraji and those who are in the hawzat. This is for all the believers to whom this wasiyah reaches until the day of judgment. Imam wants you to be first and foremost in amal, in acting out the Quran. But you will not be able to act out on the Quran until you first gain knowledge of the Quran. When it comes to knowledge of the Quran, the very basic knowledge of how to recite the Quran is something that we are often lacking at. Although in this domain, one has to praise and express appreciation for the efforts of both the World Federation, which has declared this year to be the year of the Quran. This is something that we should congratulate them and commend them for. This is beautiful, but let's see them, organizing. Let's hope they organize. They do something robust. Not just cosmetic stuff that you take ayat of the Quran and you paste them on boards and you organize a few events. No, year of the Quran means it should be really a year of the Quran. We should see people all around the world actively deliberating on the Quran, doing tadabbur, reflecting on it, reciting it, memorizing it, promote all of this. And alhamdulillah, yes, the World Federation, our Khoja communities are doing a lot. Bihamdillah, bifadlillah, and may Allah bless them and reward our Khoja leadership and our elders who are contributing to this. In the Africa Federation, for example, they organize Quran recitation, Quran memorization, Quran ma'rifah, all of these competitions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and reward you for organizing this. And you should do more of this. Incentivize, because especially with young children, one of the best ways to get them interested in something is by, organizing competitions around it. So alhamdulillah, that is beautiful. That is something that we should commend and appreciate and thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He has blessed our leadership with the vision to actually undertake. But let's take it further. Let this be something that we actually dwell more on and that we focus more on. And that we then, as a result of focusing so much on, we become distinguished in the Ummah. Right now, we're not distinguished in the Ummah for knowledge of the Quran, for recitation of the Quran, for memorization of the Quran, for tadabbur on the Quran. We're not really standing out. We're not really shining. Other people have taken the lead. Other schools are way ahead of us. We need to bridge the gap. We need to pull up our socks. We need to run faster in this race. Because Imam Ali alayhi salam is saying, I'm not satisfied with mediocre performances. La yasbiqannakum. He wants to see us among the sabiqeen, among those who have sabqat, who are the first and foremost. The rest of the ummah should be miles behind in recitation of the Quran, in tadabbur of the Quran, in memorization of the Quran, and most importantly, in acting out the Quran. Unfortunately, one area where we are really seeing a lot of distinction, Olympic level medals ought to be awarded, is in playing gymnastics with the Quran. That's where, unfortunately, some of the sectarian shuyukh are truly distinguishing themselves in playing games with the ayat of the Quran and preaching the opposite of what the Quran preaches on crucial issues like Tawheed and not asking du'as to other than Allah across ghaib. What do you see happening? People playing all kinds of games and gymnastics and semantics in order to avoid the and to dilute the actual clear message of the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. So after sharing with you this narration from Tuhaful Uqul, I want to proceed to a narration that is from Imam Abu Ja'far al-Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. This is a narration, it's actually there in Al-Kafi, but my students are always quick to remind me that, Sayyidina, you often like to open these voluminous encyclopedias and you share scans and images. And if whenever you are quoting any evidence, if you can give reference of a book that's actually available to the masses. So Al-Kafi may not necessarily be available, although we have Thaqalain blog. Inshallah, if you can search this hadith on Thaqalain, sorry, not Thaqalain blog, Thaqalain library. But a book that I've seen in many Khoja households, I'll give you the reference to that book. It's called A Bundle of Flowers. Okay, from the Garden of Traditions of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salatu wassalam. It was compiled by Ayatullah Sayyid Kamaal Faqih al-Imani. He's a prominent scholar from Isfahan, and he was actually the founder and chief of the Imam Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salam library in Isfahan. And yeah, he was the founder and chief of the Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali public library in Isfahan and Iran. And it is the same institution that has published this book. This was actually gifted to me when I went to Mombasa and I visited the Bilal Muslim Mission of Kenya over there. This was gifted to me by one of the administrators over there, Al-Hajj Fazli Abbas Datu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him for sharing this book with me and make him a partner in the thawab that we get from all the narrations that we promote from this book. I have a scanned version of this also, so I will display it for you over here. This is Bundle of Flowers, and in this version, so you can see Bundle of Flowers from the Garden of Traditions of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, Ayatullah Sayyid Kamaal Faqih al-Imani, and it's translated by Sayyid Abbas Sadr Amili and published by Amir al-Mu'mineen Library in Isfahan and digitalized by Ahlul Bayt Digital Islamic Library. If you come to page 26, I think, yes. Here you have a whole chapter, the real followers of the Ahlul Bayt and their qualities. So if you want to be distinguished from the Ummah, instead of distinguishing yourself with fabrications of the Ghulat, by following fabrications of the Ghulat, or following, mistaken transmissions or false attributions to the Ahlul Bayt, how about you actually distinguish yourself by following a hadith of the Imams that we can actually verify from the Quran? Okay, so here is a Quran verified narration. We authenticate this, and the scholars authenticate it on the basis of verification against the Quran and other authentic narrations of the Ahlul Bayt. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam told Jabir, أَيَكْتَفِي يَا جَابِرْ مَنْ يَنْتَحِلُ التَّشَيُّعَ أَنْ يَقُولَ بِحُبِّنَا أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ. Is it enough for a person to merely embellish himself as a Shia, yani to claim that he's a Shia, simply by professing love for us, the Ahlul Bayt? The Imam says no. By Allah, a person is not our Shia, he's not our follower, except if he fears Allah and obeys him. So number one, he's now going to give you qualities that are supposed to distinguish you from the rest of the entire humanity, not just the Ummah. The entire humanity should learn these qualities by looking at you if you are a Shia. Number one, you should fear Allah. You should be the foremost in fear of Allah and obedience to Him. Fear of Allah and obedience to Him means you follow the actual sunnah of the Prophet, not fabrications of ghulat and sectarian elements. Number one. Number two, or rather number one and two. So fear Allah is number one, obeying Allah is number two. Number three, O Jabir, our followers are not recognized. وَمَا كَانُوا يُعْرَفُونَ يَا جَابِرْ. The Imam says the true Shia of Ali alayhi salam were not recognized except by certain qualities. What are those qualities? At-tawadu'. They were recognized by their humility. Wat-takhashu', by their khushu', their submission and utter slavery before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wal-amana, honesty, trustworthiness. Wa-kathrati dhikrillah, praising Allah abundantly, mentioning Allah abundantly. Here, I need to take a sidebar, because unfortunately today, one of the distinguishing markers of Shiaism has become that they have become so obsessed with the dhikr of Imam that they don't have time for the dhikr of Allah. And this is not something I am claiming or that is coming from my pocket. No, Ayatullah Sayyid Kamaal al-Haidari. I will request the Islaah admins to give the link to where he has said this. There's a subtitled video that's available on the internet. You can check it out. If possible, Al-Islaah admins may even play the relevant part of the clip where Ayatullah Sayyid Kamaal al-Haidari mentions this episode, whereby one of the khutaba, one of the Ahlul Mimbar, actually approached a marja and mujtahid and Ayatullah in the Hawza, and he said, I've been invited to give lectures for Shahr Ramadan. Please, can you suggest a topic? I can't think of anything really good and important to speak about. So can you please advise me, guide me? What topic should I speak about? Shahr Ramadan. And this Ayatullah looked at him, and with great pain, he said to him, whatever you talk about, please, can you talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because Allah is, to quote his words, not mine, Allah is Madhloom on the Shia Mimbar. And this is, he's talking about the hal and the condition in the Arabic and Persian speaking world. And this is what is being mirrored, and you see a reflection of this in the English speaking world as well. Is that this great grand Ayatullah, this marja, testified that Allah is, wal-'iyadhu billah, it's not even appropriate to use the word Madhloom for Allah, because Allah is not someone you can do zulm on. But basically what he means to say is that the Zikr of Allah, the mention of Allah, is Madhloom on the Shia Mimbar. Yani Allah doesn't get enough coverage. He doesn't get enough mention on the Shia Mimbar. Now, I know people will try to make all sorts of gymnastic excuses and say, no, but Zikr of Ali is, Zikr of Allah, and we are mentioning Imam Ali because he's the beloved slave of Allah. Ya akhi, you can argue all you want to argue, but at the end of the day, Imam Baqir al-Islam is saying what? وَكَسْرَةِ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. The original Shia of Ali were people who were distinguished from the rest of the Ummah by their excessive and abundant zikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't say they were distinguished by their abundant and excessive zikr of Ali and all the time Fadail Ali and Khaybar and Khandaq and this and that. No. They were distinguished from the rest of the Ummah by their humility, by their submission to Allah, by their honesty, by their excessive and relentless and abundant zikr of Allah, and by sawm and salah, by fasting and prayers, by filial devotion, yani silatul rahim. Okay, they were known for maintaining good terms and being kind to their family members and relatives. وَالتَّعَاهُدْ لِلْفُقَرَاء, attending to the poor of their community, to the needy, helping out those people who are drowning in debts. Yani the Shia of Ali used to be very charitable, philanthropic people. They used to be very concerned about poor people in their community, and not just in their community, but yani the Imam is not limiting their activities to any community, rather to the poor in general, even if the poor guy is not a Muslim. Remember, Imam Ali alayhi salam helped out a Christian on the street when he was begging, and the Imam said, why is he begging? And it turned out that he was an officer of the government and he had retired and they were not giving him pension. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, what? This is so unfair. You utilized his energy and his services all his life, and now you've just cast him out? No. إِفْرِضُوا لَهُ عَطَاءً مِنْ بَيْتِ مَالِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. No, he's supposed to get a stipend and a pension from the public treasury of the Muslims. So the poor of every background, the Shia of Ali were the first and foremost in attending to them. The needy, those who are drowning in debt, orphans who live near them. They were known for saying the truth. Okay, they were not like the ghulat who were only interested in piling up lies upon the Imams. They were known for reciting the Quran recitation. And actually, he has translated it as reciting. But yeah, in the narrations, it's also what ta'ahud, okay, constantly revisiting and reciting the Quran and reflecting over it and acting on it, withholding the tongue from people except for benediction, yani not saying evil about people, being trustworthy for relatives in any affairs. وَكَانُوا أُمَنَاءَ عَشَائِرِهِمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ. They were the ones who used to take care of the trusts of the people. So you can see here you have a chapter about the real followers of Ahlul Bayt, and the Ahlul Bayt are saying, okay, that these are the qualities that are supposed to distinguish you. You want to alag hona hai na aapko, you have hubbut tamayyuz, you want to be different. The Imam says, okay, how about you be different by showing humility, more humility than anyone else in the Ummah, more submission to Allah than anyone else in the Ummah, more honesty than anyone else in the Ummah, more zikr of Allah than anyone else in the Ummah, more fasting and more prayers than anyone else in the Ummah, Silatul Rahim more than anyone else in the Ummah, attending to the poor more than anyone else in the Ummah, needy, helping out the debtors, orphans, saying the truth, reciting the Quran, withholding the tongue from evil, and being trustworthy. And there are so many other narrations. I don't have time, but we can go on and on mentioning narrations from Imams where they highlight these things. You see here, you have another narration from the Imam where the Imam is actually appealing to the Shia and he's saying, look, while Shia were attending him, the Imam addressing them said, behave as ornaments for us and not be a source of shame for us. When you follow the fabrications of ghulat, you will bring up, and the khurafat that the Imams attributed to that the ghulat attributed to the Imams, you will become a source of humiliation for the Imams. Okay, whereas the Imams want you to be a source of ornamentation, beautification for them. Kunu lana zaynan wa la takunu alayna shayna. Qulu linnasi husna. Speak to people good things, protect your tongues, and hold it from excessive talk and offensive speech. This is another area, unfortunately, so much tabarri rhetoric, even from the Mimbar. So many of our speakers, unfortunately, are interested only in offending people from other sects and other backgrounds. And they do not withhold their tongues from evil. And then here you have narration from Imam Sadiq saying, verily we love those who are wise and perceptive, learned, forbearing, patient, reliable, faithful. Surely Allah favored the prophets with high morality. Then he who possesses them may praise Allah for them, but he who does not have them may weep unto Allah and ask him for them. Jabir humbly asked him, what are these qualities? The Imam said, piety, contentment, patient endurance, gratefulness, forbearance, modesty, graciousness, courage, enthusiasm, passion, benevolence, truthfulness, honesty in the matter of deposits, yani amanat. Here you have authentic hadith of Imam Baqir alayhi salam saying, he who obeys Allah is our lover, is our Shia, and the one who disobeys him is an enemy of us, the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam. So similarly, as I told you, we have more narrations in this book. This is also an easily accessible book. It's there in many Khoja bookstores. You can access it. It is called Al-Mawa'idh, the sermons, Sifatu Shia, the qualities of the Shia, and Fadailu Shia, the merits of the Shia. These are 3 monographs that have been jointly published as part of one volume, which has been titled Al-Mawa'idh, the admonishments. So if you come to, and this is translated by Badr Shaheen and published by Ansariyan Publications. If you come in this version, you come to page 283, you will find this hadith that I just mentioned. And if you come to page 267, from 267 onwards, you will see numerous other narrations. If I can show you on the scan. So this is the book Sifatu Shia, Qualities of the Shia by Shaykh al-Saduq. So if we can start with the very first narration very quickly. The Shia are people of piety and diligence. What is the Imam saying here? Our Shia are people of piety and diligence, loyalty and honesty, asceticism, zuhud and worship. They perform 51 rak'ahs in a single day and night. Yani they pray all their nawafil, not just the wajib prayers, not just the fard prayers. Okay, but they also offer the mustahab, sunnah, nawafil prayers. They pass their night in qiyam, in worship. Unfortunately, these days to get the Shia to offer night prayers in Shahrul Ramadan is a challenge. Leave the rest of the year. And their days are filled with fasting. They defray the zakat. The Shia were known for being very punctual in defraying the zakat from their wealth. Yani they pay the zakat on their wealth. Today, unfortunately, this is also becoming a challenge. People don't want to give zakat. And they are known for performing the Hajj. and they refrain from committing any forbidden thing. So notice how what the Imams actually promoted was Hajj, not other visitations that have replaced Hajj and Umrah, unfortunately. And then you have numerous other narrations that we can point to. For example, if you come to here, you have a narration about the false Shiite, right? He who claims to be one of our Shia, the Imam says, while he's clinging to the handle of somebody else, is surely telling a lie. So yeah, this is basically what the Imams would tell you if they found out that you are claiming to be Shia, but you are following bid'ahs and fabrications invented by the ghulat, then they would refuse to accept you as Shia. Because delaying your iftar, delaying your maghrib, saying the third shahada in azan, making combining of the 5 daily prayers a constant practice rather than an exemption that you avail only occasionally and under certain circumstances. All of these things, these are bid'ahs that are introduced by sectarian elements. And the Imams are saying, well, if you're going to follow bid'ahs introduced by other people and abandon the sunnah that we transmitted from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then at least do us a favor and don't lie by calling yourself a Shia. Because a Shia are those who follow what we transmit and what is authentically known to be our transmission. You cannot be a true follower of Ahlul Bayt and then say, I will not follow what the Imams have said, rather I will follow what the Ghulat have said. So khair, there is a lot more that we can say about this whole book. Okay, I would recommend people to read, to find out more about the qualities. Obviously, not all the narrations are authentic. Unfortunately, even the sifat of Shia, narrations about sifat of Shia, the Ghulat obviously wanted to influence the understanding of what the Imams wanted us to have in terms of qualities and characteristics. So later on, you will encounter even narrations which have Ghulat in their chains, which they have invented to distort your identity and to introduce other qualities. But the whole summary of this lecture is that if you truly want to distinguish yourself from the Ummah, distinguish yourself in those qualities and in those areas where the Imams actually asked you to distinguish yourself, not in areas which were invented or not in things which were invented by the Ghulat.